crazy experiment today to get us a little bit
Crazy experiment.
better of an experience here.
Okay, good Shabbos, everybody. It's good to see all of you. Welcome to ACI. Some of you might not have noticed on our calendar, but this week is our monthly, what we call Open Door Shabbat, which means we go a little bit deeper to make people more exposed to what's going on in the service. And the way that it's set up is that we start off with a little bit of meditation, and then at around 10:30 we're going to start diving into the Siddur in depth, do a little Torah reading, do a little bit of Torah study. Don't worry, if you have never been here before, that's totally okay. Actually, the majority of people in this room, I think, are here for the first time, actually, which is not always the case when we start off on Shabbat morning, but that's all good in my book. And so I'll do my best to remember everybody's name. Some people are just happen to see you here for the first time this morning, which is terrific. And I'm also welcoming a new cohort of our Pathways to Judaism class, which just met on Thursday night. They know who they are. They can mention them, introduce themselves as you get to know the other people here. I hope the room is warm enough for all of you. You don't need any books for the moment until about 10:30. If you have a book, it's fine. Just leave it next to you. And again, you don't have any experience. You okay, Adam?
Yeah, I'm just. That's not an.
No.
It's fine. You can keep going.
Okay.
I'm just gonna.
If you don't have much meditation experience in your life, that's totally okay. This is a no experience. It's all no experience necessary on a day like today. But it's a chance to set ourselves a little bit and to focus a little bit just on our breathing and taking it nice and slow. What I like to remind people is that one of the biggest things we have forgotten about the Siddur is that a lot of what is in the Jewish prayer book was added at various points to prepare us to be better suited to pray at other points in the service. But at some point along the way, it just becomes looking like a gigantic book of Hebrew prayers that have all just been in there for all time, which is not true. But nonetheless, if it feels that way, then that isn't a great way for us to feel more comfortable in the synagogue. So this week, we're actually going to do a meditation that I do often. But since many of you are here for the first time, it's even better. I don't have to worry about having to repeat something, because for most of you, it's not a repeat. And it's called the loving kindness meditation. And the loving kindness meditation is based on the idea that how do we set in our minds. Good morning, Ted. Good morning, Kaylee. How do we set into our minds the idea that we can love people that we otherwise might make us really angry and really turn us off? I feel like in early February, as I've been telling everyone in the synagogue, I've been hoping that 2026 will be better than 2025. Admittedly, I can't say that it's starting off feeling like that, but there's 11 more months to the year, so I'm willing to give it more than 1 month, and thinking about that act of loving kindnesses becomes really critical. This year's going to be better than the last one. So, with that in mind. Just find a comfortable position for yourself. Just I find that it's helpful to have good posture when I meditate, which I have been known to do. The big thing that you want to focus on here is about being intentional about your breathing. Breathing in through the nose as opposed to the mouth. And taking it nice and slowly so that you can kind of feel it moving across your body. So take some deep breaths in, deep breaths out, deep breaths in, and deep breaths out. My eyes will be half closed, but I will try not to make eye contact with any of you because I don't want you to feel self-conscious if you don't feel good about keeping your eyes open. But I would recommend keeping your eyes closed. The purpose of this meditation is to soften your relationship to what we would call afflictive mind states that makes them more approachable and less intractable. Sympathetic joy and equanimity are important to meditation because they help us concentrate our attention and let us have our thoughts rather than letting our thoughts have us. The process is really, in a way, about directly observing your feelings. And in doing so, we start to embody what in Judaism we sometimes call loving kindness, but in Hebrew we call it gimilut chasadim or gimilut chesed. And the idea of loving kindness is the way that we look with people with soft eyes and with affection. So while you're resting and breathing, I want you to pick someone in your life who loves you unconditionally. Maybe they're here with you right now. But I want you to imagine that person and allow your heart to bask in these feelings. Breathe and let your heart have that feeling of what it's like to be truly loved by someone else. And if perhaps you are saying to yourself, I don't know someone that would actually love me in that way, then you have to try and imagine someone treating you that way, what it would feel like. And imagine that person looking at you with soft, kind eyes and saying, may you be safe and protected. May you be free from inner and outer harm. May you be happy and contented. May you be healthy and whole to whatever degree possible. It might feel artificial to say things to yourself, but ultimately, we want to feel safe and free. And the essence of loving kindness is that sense of bringing down our guard from the rest of the world. Now I want you to imagine that person who loves you unconditionally and direct your love back to them and say the same thing. May you be safe and protected and free from inner and outer harm. May you be happy and contented. May you be healthy and whole. Now expand your field of vision a little bit. Imagine not just that person who loves you unconditionally, but the people who you feel that are closest to you in your life. Perhaps they are family members or friends or trusted confidants of whatever kind. Pretend that you're sitting around a space with all of these people looking at each other and feeling just that unconditional tenderness that happens when people feel loved and cared for by one another. And then say to everybody at the table, may you be safe and protected and free from inner and outer harm. May you be happy and contented. May you be healthy and whole to whatever degree possible. And then once you feel ready, I want you to expand that field of vision to what we would probably call our tribe. The kind of large groups of people where you feel most at home. Maybe it's other Jewish people for some of you, but it could be people who live in your neighborhood. It could be people who have a similar profession to you or a similar background, or they come from a similar city or place around the world. But it's a group of people that even if you don't know everyone, if it's that category, when you meet someone who is from that tribe, as it were, you feel automatically tied to them. Imagine meeting a stranger and finding out that they happen to share this very important part of themselves with you. Look at them in the eye and say those same words. May you be safe and protected and free from inner and outer harm. May you be happy and contented. May you be healthy and whole to whatever degree possible. And finally, I want you to go into a very different direction. And I want you to picture someone that you loathe right now. Don't worry, you're not going to have to tell anybody who it is. Picture who that person is. Allow yourself to be drawn into the feelings that are only natural to happen with someone who just sets you off in ways that are disturbing and sad, and sometimes you might feel that it's necessary, but often it leaves you feeling worse. I want you to look that person in the eye. Visualize them again. And see if you can find it in your heart to say to them those same words. May you be safe and protected and free from inner and outer harm. May you be happy and contented. May you be healthy and whole to whatever degree possible. It might feel strange to say it about someone like that. But can you experiment with it? Can you allow yourself to test how it might feel to say that, even to someone who seems as far away from you as possible? And if you don't feel it's okay, so if you don't feel you can do it, that's okay. But if you can, how will you use that the next time you see them, before you allow your feelings about them to have you, rather than you having feelings about them? Now we're going to take 15 minutes to do a quiet sit. Stay in whatever position is most comfortable to you. Nice and quiet, and focus on our breathing. When you feel ready, you can open your eyes. If they're closed, give yourself a little stretch. Don't be too intimidated. If you haven't done that in a while or ever, it gets easier. What I want is, there are more people in the room than when I close my eyes. So we're gonna take like 3 minutes to stretch and say hello to other people. If you don't have books, you should get one blue book and one red book from the back bookshelves. And then we're gonna dive in. But in the meantime, take a stretch. Please say hello to someone you don't know, which really should be most people in the room with most other people they see in the room, at least based on who I'm seeing here. Augustina? Yeah. Five, 6, 7, 8,
I'm sorry, I haven't taken mine yet, and I'm reading those. I can, yeah, I don't know, but I'm always, it always feels to me like I can choose in as soon as the mission's over, so I'm curious to see if there are anything. Yeah, no, the tiny little twigs that yeah. Yeah, but definitely. Yeah, I feel like I would honestly, lots. I need
In about a minute, we're going to get started up again.
Well, I usually can.
All right, my friends. Glad to hear people are getting to know each other. I'm just going to see if I now find everyone's name here in this morning because it's all legible. So Margaret, David, Abigail, Teddy, McKaylee, Susan, Augustina, Lou, Ari, Sarah, Zubin, Zach, Blake, Adam. Okay. So believe it or not, and I'm not saying this, it won't be irrelevant for at least a little while longer, and I'm sure we'll be okay. Technically at the moment, just so you're not confused, we don't have a minion. And the reason we don't have a minion is because there's a decent number of people here in this room who are in the process of becoming Jewish, but are not yet Jewish. So right now, if my count is correct, we have 9. Sadly, but for the recent blizzard, we would have 10. Sorry, Teddy. The day of my previous class was supposed to go to the mikvah was the day of Snowmageddon. So we did not get to go to the mikvah. We're going at the beginning of March. But I'm fairly certain we'll get one before it's time to read Torah. But fortunately, this part we don't need to have. So open. I know it's grab touch up, but I think it's only 10:35, so we're all right. But so for people who are new to being in a synagogue, there are. Adam, do you have a red book you can hand me? When you come into at least our synagogue, you're grabbing 2 books on Shabbat. One is thin and blue, one is thick and red. The blue book is called the Siddur, the prayer book. It comes from the Hebrew word for Seder, which means order. If you're like, doesn't that sound like the thing you do on Passover? Yes, it's the same word. It's the thing that keeps stuff in order. And this is what's called a Chumash, which is a copy of the Torah, of the 5 books of Moses. Chumash comes from the Hebrew word chamesh, which means 5. Okay. And the way that things work on Open Door Shabbat is that the first part is that we go through each part of the service and we keep rotating a little bit about each part of it over and over again so that we're constantly learning a little something new about parts we probably haven't really looked at that closely before. So today we're actually doing the Torah service, the reading of the opening of the Ark and the reading of the Torah. It is quite appropriate that we're doing that today. Because anyone, maybe people who are in pathways, I don't know if you know that, but anyone who is a more regular Shabbat morning attendee could tell me why it is appropriate to do that today. Ari? Yes, so this morning, the weekly Torah portion is the giving of the 10 Commandments. So it's appropriate that we do it today, of all days. And so open up your prayer books to page 139. What we're going to look at today is what we say or what we sing when the ark is opened. As people who come frequently open door Shabbat know, I assume that everything in the Siddur was either written by or edited by a human. So even though certain things in the Siddur, one might say were said by God, someone still had to put this all together in a book. And so like any book, it means that people made choices about why to put something in or leave something else out, or to write it a certain way or write it not a certain way. So what I want you to do is to read in the English. It's a little bit confusing because it has what we call transliterated Hebrew on the left. If you look on the left side, you will see that there's 3 indented paragraphs. Ignore those, they're all in Hebrew, unless you want to read them in Hebrew. And I want you to look at read the first 5 paragraphs that are like not indented. So they're all in English. None compares to you. Adonai reigns, source of compassion. And then whenever the ark was carried forward, Torah shall come from Zion. I want you to read these quietly and just take a stab. Why would someone write this? Why would someone pick this? Remember, there are no right or wrong answers to this question. Your guess is as good as mine. So take a moment to read quietly. Okay. I don't know. Any initial thoughts? Why would someone write this? Why would someone pick this to be the thing that we would recite as we're preparing to take a Torah out of the ark? Okay. Okay. Okay, but so I used an interesting phrase there, Teddy, preparing the space. Say a little more about that.
It's a way to kind of acknowledge the greatness of what's coming near you, and just to get everybody, I guess, to have God listening to you, that you're mentally ready and acknowledging the presence of God.
I'm going to press Teddy a little bit on this because Teddy works in the hospitality industry, like in the hotel industry. So, what's the big deal about setting up a place for someone?
It's your thought about it, you're ready, or there.
Yeah. Setting up a place in a particular way is, among other things, a sign of respect. You know, if you were having someone, you know, stay in your home without you there, and you just left the place, you know, a complete mess. I mean, it would still be the same home, but it would not be a great sign of respect. You know, I have a really hard time making my bed in the morning. And by really hard time, I mean I don't make my bed in the morning. As a general matter, I actually keep things in my life quite neat and tidy, but for whatever reason, I've never really been great about making my bed. Except occasionally, you know, there'll be my parents or perhaps my in-laws will be coming to my apartment and staying to help watch my children, and then I will make the bed. And it's not because they're my parents. It really could be anybody who was staying in my bed. It just seems like strange that I wouldn't make the bed. So you're setting up a place, and what was the original place where this whole prayer is supposed to remind us of? What's it trying, like, what, when we say we're in a synagogue, but what other places might it be trying to, yes?
Sinai?
Okay, one absolutely is Mount Sinai. So again, this week's Torah portion, we hear what are known as the Aseret HaDevarim, the 10 Commandments, the 10 statements. And so giving the Torah in some ways is supposed to simulate, in a small symbolic way, getting the Torah. There are a few ways that a room is set up to do this. Anyone want to guess the most obvious one? There's a very obvious one.
The ark behind you?
Well, okay, so one is the ark. I should go even more basic than the ark, Sarah. Yeah, there are stairs. I know that it seems like, but like, you're supposed to read Torah and in theory also lead tefillot from an elevated space from the rest of the community. Some synagogues it's like this: you'll go up there and you'll walk up the steps. Some synagogues have one like in the center, but it's almost always elevated, and that is supposed to be like walking up a mountain. Some of you might have at some point been in a synagogue in your life where they go really hardcore on this, and they actually have like the entire walkway up to the bima is like walking upward, or in some cases walking downward, but like then you walk upward again. It's like we are not that ambitious. We were not that ambitious in our architecture here, but at a minimum, it's like Mount Sinai because you have to walk up to get there. What else does it remind? Like, remember, what is all of this? You know, all of this Torah reading, all of this reading from the prayer book. What is all of this supposed to be replacing? I'm sorry. Can you translate that, Margaret?
The temple, I guess. Like
Yeah.
The original.
So at one point, right? At one point there was this stuff happening. There was ritual happening in the temple. Did they read Torah in the temple? It's not a trick question. No, they didn't read Torah. They didn't read Torah in the temple. At least not in the first temple. They sacrificed animals. They had things that they might have said when they sacrificed animals, but there was no rabbi and cantor, officiating some big service in the temple. But so a lot of this is also supposed to simulate a little bit like what it would have been like in the temple. A lot of the words are the same words. The Torah, the cover that we put on the table to read Torah is called a parochet in Hebrew. There was also a parochet for the tabernacle that was carried in the desert. There was an offering that was made every single day called the Tamid offering. The name of that light up there is called, anyone? It's called the Ner Tamid, the always lit light, as opposed to the always sacrificed animal, basically. So everything alludes to these kind of two things. One is Mount Sinai, and one is the temple in Jerusalem. And so going back then to my original question, right? So because Teddy kind of started us off here about place. Why would someone choose this of all things to be what we say when we bring out the Torah? Luke? Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot in there about God being a ruler. I can't remember if this book uses the word. Yeah, to try and be more gender friendly, they translate anything where it says king, they translate it as sovereign, which is a very mealy mouth word. I prefer the role like ruler, but like it's basically emphasizing God being like in charge. Sovereign is just, I don't know, for me it feels like a very strange word to use. But the first words of this also might sound a little bit familiar. Ein kamocha va'Elohim Adonai ve'ein k'ma'asecha. It actually, for those people who are familiar with what they hear in a synagogue, the words might sound different, similar to something else that you might have heard at different points in time. Yes, Ezra. Yes. So one of the, actually, this was in last week's Torah portion when the Red Sea was split. And it's also in the prayer book where we say, who is mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai? Who is like you? God. And so it's starting off about God. But what are we eventually going to do once we open the ark? Don't overthink it. When we open the ark, what do we do after we open the ark? Well, we sing, but what are we doing physically? We are taking the Torah out of the ark. I know sometimes the question just seems so obvious that like you have this brain fart and you're like, I can't believe it can't possibly be that simple. But yes, it is that simple. We will open the doors. We will take out the Torah. And what's interesting to think about is the Torah is not God. Like, remember, the Torah is not supposed to be like a replica of God. Why would it not be a replica of God?
Because that'd be an idol.
Yeah, it will basically be an idol, right? You can't make an image of God. So you're taking this thing out. And so really, when you're taking it out, we're emphasizing God first because you're not supposed to like worship it as an object. You're not really supposed to worship it as an object. What you're really worshiping when you read the Torah is not the object, but the words, the words that are in it. Because again, per David's point about like Mount Sinai, right? The idea is that like they were out Mount Sinai, and when they were out Mount Sinai, they heard God speak, which we will come back to a little bit later when we focus on the Parsha. But so it's the same, the idea of what the Torah represents, and it's always really important to kind of remember this, is that one of the reasons Judaism didn't die when the temple was destroyed was that somehow they were able to convince people to turn the physical connection of God that they got from a temple into studying words and repeating words. It's really important to remember how strange and radical that is. Like if you think about it, that's a very, very radical change to say we're going to de-emphasize that it has to be a specific place at a specific time, but instead we're going to focus on words and what the words mean and what someone else thought the words mean and what someone else thought that person meant when they thought the words mean, and everything over and over and over again. So we're doing something similar to Mount Sinai and something similar to the temple. Oh, sorry, Margaret said the temple. But it's also radically different. It's also radically different. It's also radically different. And when we open up the ark, where it says, whenever the ark was carried, Moses would say, Ki mitzion tetzei Torah, udvar Adonai Yerushalayim, Baruch shenatan Torah le'amo Yisrael b'kedushato. Where it says, whenever the ark was carried forward, where is it referring to? Like where, like again, going back to place, like where are they actually doing this? Ezra. Yeah, perfect. They carried an ark through they carried, not an ark like this, right? It's like an ark that has had wooden poles that you could like carry it. But they basically carried it throughout the desert. And it's also trying to remind us in doing so that the carrying of the ark is a symbol of something else that we are trying to remind us the Torah provides for us. Think about what it would have been like for the Israelites to march through the desert. They don't know at this point they're going to be there for 40 years, but they can pretty much be certain it's not going to be like an easy peasy, journey. So why have a special, what is carrying an ark that has God's presence throughout the desert also possibly symbolizing?
That God's with you.
Okay, go a little further though than that, because God is with you can mean a lot of things, but in particular, what protection? That there's like a danger for it. It's hard to think in. Well, a couple of years ago, I would have said that this was not a hard thing for me to imagine. In 2026, it's easier for me to imagine. It's important to remember that that there are a lot of images about the Torah and the taking out of the Torah and the studying of the Torah that are very warlike metaphors. So in the case of the Bible, it's like they're walking through the desert, because when they're walking through the desert, one of the things they're going to do is fight other people. So the ark, in many ways, is like their protection. It's a little weird, I think, for a lot of us to think of marching around with the Torah as like going into battle. But it might not be so crazy for some people to feel that way. Like, under what circumstances might a person see the image of a Torah marching around the sanctuary being an image of protection from something? Like, what might be some reasons a person would see it as protection?
Very similar to the way that armies march, with like somebody carrying the standard at the front of the group, and people following and saying this is what we're lining up on.
Yeah, so I mean, it's certainly like a more classical image of like how we imagine people going off to war. I don't think that's the way they do it today. Now it's like someone with like a drone, in a room. It's definitely not the same as the marching of people, but it certainly was the way they did it in Braveheart, and Braveheart seemed kind of accurate to me. I watched that was the last Mel Gibson movie I ever watched. But we didn't really know what we know now about Mel Gibson when he made Braveheart, or the early Lethal Weapon movies, But protection is not a small thing. It's not a small thing for a Jewish person to feel like they are in a synagogue, and as the Torah marches around, they should feel a sense of security and safety. By the way, for those who know a little bit about things that go on in the state of Israel, you might be aware that there's a large percentage of the population in the state of Israel that is Jewish and refuses to serve in the army. And it's a constant battle within and among Jewish Israelis. Although I'm not particularly sympathetic to this argument, the answer that their rabbis of that community would give as to why they don't need to fight, which I will be completely honest, is totally in Jewish texts, is that studying Torah is the protection. That's what they would say. They would say that for people who don't want to study Torah, the idea of like serving in the army is a good secondary way of protection, but actually the best way to protect people is to study Torah. Whether or not that's something you believe, I'm not saying it, but it is important to remember that's the image that is being evoked here. And again, safety and security of being together in a synagogue, hearing the words of the Torah at different points in time might mean different things. You know, in 2026 as a Jewish person, I feel that more than maybe I would have 10 years ago. It does not necessarily be violent, but it could just be a sense of like, this is a thing that is there to, in some ways, keep us safe. And so now, what time is it? 11:01, perfect timing, and we have a minyan now. We are going to read from the Torah. Susan is going to be our Torah reader for this morning. We're reading 3 aliyot again, so that we can dive into it. But for anyone who is anyone who wants to, but especially for my new students in Pathways, when we take out the Torah, I'd like to invite you to be able to come up and actually see it. You can come up if you want. You don't have to. I won't single anyone out. But you might, if you've never seen inside of a Torah, you might want to. And some people will come up and will have aliyot, which they will say blessings before each Torah reading. Those honors are limited in a synagogue to people who are already Jewish. So, but I want you to be able to see the Torah and what it looks like on the inside. We'll go into more depth about it later. But in the meantime, I do need to assign the 3 aliyot that Susan's going to be reading. So would anyone like to have the first? Have you already given them out, or do I need to give them out?
I haven't. I just said that I'd like Ari to have one because it was his father's yard site last week.
Oh, terrific. Okay, so Ari should definitely have one in memory of his father. Number 2, Adam, because he's that's fine. Yeah, well, sorry. Adam will go first. Ari can go second. Anybody want the third? Aliyah? Anyone? 6, 7? Okay. What? Wait, you're.
I'll take it. I might turn down an honor.
Oh, how about a guest here, like David, Margaret? You want to do it? Okay. You want to do it together, or you want to do it, or just one of you? Either way is fine. Okay, great. So, all right. So this is where you should have a red book, and just please rise quickly as I take out the Sacred Torah.
It's 3.
You can be seated. Sorry. Again, this is either a reminder or first time people are hearing it. So, on Shabbat morning, we traditionally read 7 individual readings of the Torah. 7 because 7 days in the week. There actually are other days of the week that Jews read from the Torah, but we'll get to that some other time. But it's 7 different times, and The term, apropos David's comment earlier about Sinai, is that when each reading of the Torah is referred to as a what? Sarah, yes? An aliyah. An aliyah is a Hebrew word that comes from the Hebrew word for to go up. Because again, you're going up to the bima, so it's like each person is like ascending the mountain a little bit. It also, by the way, is the term that is used in modern Hebrew for what it means for a person who is Jewish to move and settle in Israel. Though less popularly, the term for being born in Israel and moving out of it is known as equivalent of going down. So I have mixed feelings about that part. But it is in fact what the word is. So an aliyah is that we are coming up to the Torah as we hear it being read. And so Adam is gonna, or Margaret or David said, none of you are co-hanim, yes? No?
My mom's about coming, but my dad's not Jewish, so it doesn't transfer.
Okay. Still waiting for that. Still waiting for that.
We're waiting for the Kohenet and Lydia to,
Just saying. In 3 years, we had that one guy. Remember, the one who lives on Roosevelt Island and came here on Shabbat morning because he usually walks to the east side, and it turned out he was a Kohen, and we were all so excited.
That was it.
And then I guess he doesn't mind walking in the cold over the bridge, which is more power to him. So the Torah reading is found on page
432.
Okay.
Yamod Moshe ben Avraham Halevi Bimkam Kohen.
Okay. It's right here.
Baruch Adonai Hambarah.
Baruch Adonai Borach Le'olam. Amen.
Baruch Adonai Hambarach Le'olam. Amen. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher b'charbanu mikol hamim natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Lishma Yidro Kohen Midyan Choten Moshe Et Kol Asher Asa Elohim Moshe L'Yisrael Amo Ki Hotzi Adonai Et Yisrael Mimitzrayim Vayikach Yidro Choten Moshe Et Tzipora Eshet Moshe Achar Shluchecha V'et Shnei Banecha Asher Shem Ha'echad Gershom Ki Amar Ger Hayiti Be'eretz Nochriya Hashem Ha'echad Eliezer Ki Elohei Avi Be'ezri V'yatzileni Me'erev Paro.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch Atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Yamod Aryeh ben Chaim and Nechama Aliyah Sheni. The second reading is on page 433 on verse 5 on the top of the page.
Shalom. Again, for people who are new to this, you're probably noticing that like Susan is singing what she's reading. There's an entire set of notes that were later added to the Torah that a person who is reading from the Torah practices and learns to read. So when you actually look inside of the Torah, you will not see those notes there. Which is one of many reasons why a lot of people don't really ever learn how to read Torah. But the melody is, I'll show you at some point. It has to do with the punctuation of what it is that Susan's
It's a
reading.
learning device.
It's a learning device, yes.
Devo Yitro Choten Moshe.
Yeah, there we go.
Baruch Hu Adonai Hamorah.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol amim v'nasan oretz Torah. Baruch Atah Adonai nosein haTorah.
Amen.
There's a lot of This whole- Amen. V'yavo Yitro chotein Moshe uvanav ishto el Moshe el hamidbar shehu choneh sham har ha'Elohim vayomer Moshe ani hotencha Yitro ba'elecha ve'ishtecha u'shnei banecha imaha V'yitzei Moshe likrat chotno v'yishtachu v'yishlach lo v'yishalu ish l're'echu l'shalom v'yavohu ha'ohela v'yisaper Moshe l'chotno et kol asher asa Adonai l'faro l'mitzrayim al otot Yisrael et kol ha'tala'ah asher matzatam b'derech v'yatzilem Adonai.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher nasa lanu Torah sanes v'chayolam v'tavis ha'cheinu. Baruch Atah Adonai nosein haTorah.
Amen. Ari, you want us to do an Almali Rachamim for your father?
Sure.
Okay. Ari is just after the second yard site of his father. And I will, where is it? So I have to do it the old-fashioned way by memory. El b'lei rachamim shochein b'amromim ha'seminu kanefona tachachan fe'ashkina b'malo kadoshimu tahorim kizor harakia mazirim et nishmat Chaim ben Yosef Meir Shelcho Leolamah Beganin Tehet Brachamim Anamal Rachamim Astura Beseder Kanafek Leolamim Utzror Bitzror Chaim et Nishmato Adonai Unachalato V'yadno B'Shalom Mishkavo V'nomar Amen. Again, depending on how familiar you are being in synagogue, you probably notice that in synagogue there's always a point at which that we will have a prayer that people only stand, basically those who have lost someone. It's colloquially known as the Kaddish, but that is sort of a general prayer for every single person, but sometimes there is, much as we celebrate birthdays, in Judaism we remember the day of what's known as a person's yortzeit, which is the day that they passed away. It happens that Ari's father's yortzeit was a week ago, but we want to honor his memory either way. Third Aliyah. I believe that it's the two of you.
The third reading is on page 433, verse 9. Pardon me.
Mazal Devora bat Rachel Christopher.
Yamdu Mazal Devora bat Rachel Christopher.
David Ben Yoman.
David
Tuvia.
David Tuvia
Ben.
ben Makav Ephraim. Oh my gosh, so she.
Baruch
Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai notein haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Yichad Yitro. Kol tova asher asa Adonai leYisrael asher hatzilo miyad Mitzrayim vayomer Yitro Baruch Adonai
אשר הציל אתכם מיד מצרים ומיד פרעה, אשר הציל את העם מתחת יד מצרים. עתה ידעתי כי גדול אדוני מכל האלוהים, כי בדבר שזדו עליהם. ויקח יתרו חותן משה עולה זבחים לאלוהים, ויבוא אהרון וכל זקני ישראל לאכול לחם עם חותן משה לפני האלוהים.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu torat emet, v'chayei olam nata b'tofenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. It's actually really good that you guys go back down. It's really good that Margaret and David came up in a group, because one of the things that oftentimes what you'll see in a synagogue is that the people who get these various honors are often for specific special occasions. So sometimes it could be we're remembering someone that we lost. It could be because a person or persons come up because they're getting married or they just had a baby. Technically speaking, all a bar or bat mitzvah is having your first aliyah to the Torah. Which if we all treated it that way, it would be a lot less expensive. But that is actually really all a bar bat mitzvah is really having your first aliyah to the Torah. At this point, though, we're going to recite. You can go back to your seat, David.
Did you want to give people a chance to look in the Torah?
I'm going to leave it out so they can. I'm going to leave it out so people can look at it at the end. We're going to recite what's called Amisha Berach Lacholim, which is a blessing for people who are cholim, which are those who are sick. At our synagogue, or pretty much every synagogue, we collect a list of names every week that are sick for any number of reasons that people would like me to add. Then after I read all of those names, anybody who is here who wants to add a name may add a name as well. And by the way, those names do not have to be Jewish. Names do not have to be Jewish. They could be any, so if it's someone that you just know is about to have surgery, or they're going through a severe illness of some kind, or whatever it might be, you don't have to explain the reason why. You just, when we reach the pause, we'll add a name or names that you have in mind. I should also mention that this week is the memorial date of a famous musician from modern Judaism, whose name was Debbie Friedman, who actually wrote a melody for this song, which we do not always sing here on most weeks, but I think it's invaluable to know, because that'll be one of the things that will last from her memory, even though she's been dead for 15, 16 years at this point, which is a long time. So now I'm going to recite a Misha Berach for Cholim, and when I reach the pause, you can add any names of those who may be in your thoughts. Misha Berach Avotenu Abraham Yitzchak Yaakov Sarah Rivka Rachel Leah Hu Yivarech Virapet HaCholim Aaron Vajda Avram Michal Ben Sylvia Fred Wishnoff Elizabeth Bruner Eric David Blacksman Esther Batchana Fega Bat Feivel Valea Gary Lefkowitz Joel Tarlow Leah Chana Bat Lena Malcolm Mungo Menachem Mendel Yonah Ben Bela Yaakov Michael Laster, Raina Rosendorf, Roni Joel, Sarah Chana, Bat Zisel, Bedov Beryl, Ben Rav Chaim Halevi, Shalom Ben Chaim, Shandel Gittel, Bat Rivka, Sherry Levin, Wilton Mungo, Zalman Mordechai, Aharon Ben Yehudit. Does anyone have any other names they would like added? Yes. Yes, David.
Darlene Correna.
Okay, Ezra.
Richard Cohen, Laura Cohen, and Joseph Collins.
Yes? Anyone else? Okay. Vet kol hacholim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yimalei Rachamim Aleihem Lagazikam L'Ra'apotam Vishlach lahem merafua shema min hashamayim refuah nefesh refuat haguf Shabbat himili zor v'rkaval abo hashabbat alav izman kariv v'nomar amen. Okay, so we've read a little bit of the Torah portion today. Now I'm going to give you a piece of paper that's a handout where we're going to dive a little more in depth. Although Open Door Shabbat is a little bit different in terms of how much of the Torah we read, this is pretty much the way we do what in some cases is called a sermon. But I don't do a lot of frontal sermons anymore, except on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And so it's a handout. You never come back where you do once and you're and Susan actually didn't read this part of the Torah portion today, but I want to actually talk about the other main part of this Torah portion, which is God speaking. Some people kind of mistakenly say that this Torah portion is when the Jews received the Torah. There you go. That's actually not entirely accurate. It doesn't say anywhere here that actually, at this point in time, the Jewish people receive like the Torah that we have in the Ark. What it does say is that God speaks to them. And this is actually something that's really kind of challenging for us to think about a little bit, because it turns out that even our rabbis were very uncomfortable with trying to explain what it means to say that God spoke to people. So just think about that for a moment. Why would it be like an uncomfortable idea to say that God spoke? I mean, after all, the Bible says all the time, God spoke to Aaron, or God spoke to Moses, God spoke to Abraham. Why would it be at all problematic to try and figure out what that actually means in practicality? Blake, were you raising your hand?
Does it humanize? No.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a challenge. There's a challenge here whenever you describe God even a little bit like actual people. Why is that? Sarah?
Well, I think for two reasons. One is that it can turn God into an idol.
Say more about why.
So when you start to personify God, you turn God into something that is capable of being concrete and therefore, idolized. And then I also think it brings God too close to humans, because imbuing God with.
Right, so a huge part of God's, reason for being that God reminds people of over and over again is, I'm not like the rest of you. I'm different than all of you. So anything that that makes it seem like God is like people then becomes like problematic. It leads to a second problem that Sarah pointed out, which is that once you start using human words to describe something, you are also opening up things that God is not. And this can, by the way, be taken to the absurd, right? Because you start then using words like infinite a lot, like saying that God is like infinitely powerful. But then at some point, it leads to some weird like brain teasers for it. My personal favorite is, can God make 2 + 2 = 5? Which will really mess with someone's head who's grew up with a very traditional Jewish education, because they'll say, well, of course God can make 2 + 2 = 5. I'm like, well, if God can make 2 + 2 = 5, then everything that I've been taught about math my entire life doesn't actually really work anymore. So how can God do that? And then you start getting really mealy-mouthed about it. So it always leads into like weird terms. And it's a struggle it's just a struggle of finding the right words for it. Some people can only describe God through what God is not, because that's the closest they can get to saying something without feeling like they're offending it. So the speaking part is really is a strange thing. It's also for another reason. Like why might you can even tell it from this just one verse that I have from the Torah portion. And the blare of the horn, the shofar, grew louder and louder as Moses spoke. God answered him in thunder. In thunder. Like, what's the other hard thing about trying to describe God speaking? David?
Actually sound.
Well, yeah, what does it actually sound like? You know, one of my Bible teachers in rabbinical school taught me that God is always accompanied by catastrophic weather. So when it says, so this is clearly the way people thousands of years ago, you know, have you ever had like someone a joke for you for when you were a kid, like when you heard thunder and lightning, and it's like, oh yeah, God's going bowling. Or someone, I don't know if anyone ever told you that. Like I was told that by like friends, like, oh, like the thunder and lightning is just God is going bowling because it sounds like pins falling down. The funny thing is that it's completely ridiculous, but also not ridiculous at all, because anytime you see God appear in the Torah, there's weather accompanying it. Wind, rain, thunder, lightning, hail, all of those things are like fire. It's never like a nice breezy day that's happening there. Yes, Ezra.
I remember there was a story, I don't know who the prophet was, but it was a prophet, and like God came in a bunch of like really violent forms, like violent forms of weather.
Mm-hmm.
Tiny voice at the end, and that was God speaking.
Impressive that you know this. That is a story of Elijah the prophet.
I'm trying to figure out how that's going, because I know it's connected, but I don't know how to.
Because in that particular story, it's actually a perfect story, which is this image is of, it says that there was all this weather and there was fire and all of these loud sounds, and then it was just a tiny sound that you could barely hear, and then God starts to speak. We don't even know if that tiny sound is supposed to be God or just like the sound of silence, as Simon and Garfunkel once sang, right? We don't know. But so what are some possible options, though? When we say that God speaks, what are some options of like what that could mean? Again, you're not committing blasphemy by guessing, I promise you. Adam.
Well, I mean, one thing could just be that everybody hears it in their heads. It's not something that their ears actually hear. Or you could have, the standard booming voice.
Okay, so you have two options. One here is that like we're all just hearing it in their head. Like it's just like it's like a voice. It's the inner monologue talking to you. And maybe we're all just hearing the same inner monologue at the same time. The other option is a more literal one. Like it actually is just sounds like a human being speaking. As problematic as it might be to say that God speaks, it does also say in Judaism that God speaks in the language of human beings. So that sounds to me like it would be totally reasonable for God to speak to people in a language, because how else would we understand someone? But what else? What else could be options? What it means to say God speaks?
Be symbolism, right? People say, I'll sense a peace after praying on something, or a sign, right? And I think a lot of this actually, you hear more of it in the New Testament, modern Christian personal relationship with God. People say, I prayed on it, and the Lord spoke to me, but in a more bigger sense.
Yeah, well, it's also an expression, right, that we use sometimes when we say something speaks to me. Like it doesn't actually always necessarily mean someone said anything to you. It means speaks to me sometimes is a metaphor we use for, I feel like I was being connected or identified or seen in this moment. Other options?
I've been thinking about, does God speak to Moses or does God speak to the people? I think there's very different implications of defending it. And God speaks to Moses or Abraham or Aaron. Moses or Aaron are the ones who then interpret for the rest of the people what God said. It's very different. And God speaks to everything.
So it's funny because you're bringing up a great point here. Like one of the things that the rabbis who try to comment on this can't come to an agreement on, unsurprisingly for rabbinic commentators to this day, they can't agree on much, is that the whole part of like God speaking versus human beings speaking is kind of all over the place. Like on the back side of your page, there's a text from a mystical text that basically says that that Moses is basically God's voice box. So basically, like it's Moses's voice, but it's actually God talking. So like Moses is almost like a ventriloquist dummy, but for God. But there's also the possibility that it's a very literal form of speech. And the reason we know that, it's not in your handout, is anybody who's familiar with this know what after the Aseret HaDevarim, the 10 Commandments are given, what is the immediate reaction of the Israelites? Is it, gee, thanks? What? Yeah, if you look in the book, the immediate passage after God gives the most important, what we often say are the most important 10 phrases in Judaism, right? A thing that is put on art and sometimes in places where it's probably illegal, but as important as it is, it's hard to deny that it's not important. The immediate reaction of the Israelites is not, gee, thanks. Those sound great. It's actually, as Zubin said, please stop talking to us. Because if we have to keep listening to you talk directly to us, what's going to happen?
I think it's pretty daunting and terrifying for.
Yeah. Well, what are they worried about?
Die.
They're going to worry they're going to die. They're going to worry that it's so loud that they're going to die. That's when Moses actually like goes up to the mountain and disappears for a while to get more stuff, and only God speaks to them. So it's funny. Sometimes we sort of sugarcoat that some of these experiences actually for the original people who had them were unpleasant. Not every experience a person has where they feel connected to God has to feel good. It's nice if it does, but not every experience is going to necessarily feel good. And this Torah portion is a great example of it, because you would think that it would be like a totally inspiring, exciting moment, but actually what the Israelites say is, please stop. You're going to kill us if you keep talking like this. Any other options for like, what does it mean to say God spoke? Susan? Well, sure, yeah. Yeah, I mean, just the very idea of God, like, this is a little bit what Sarah was alluding to earlier, like, if God speaks, then you start asking all kinds of questions. So does that mean God has a mouth or ears or vocal cords? Because then you're starting to build up like what looks like a human. And God makes very clear that God's not a human. So it's one of those things where sometimes it just ends up being almost avoided. My personal favorite answer is that Moses Maimonides says that anytime it says in the Torah that God spoke to someone, anyone know this? It was in a dream, that they're asleep. I'm not exactly sure how that works for the 10 Commandments, because that means that basically like everyone was taking like a nap at Mount Sinai, but it's more like saying like when God appeared to Abraham and told him, go and leave the land, leave your land to the land that I will show you. Apparently Abraham is sleeping in Maimonides' mind. That's why some people like think that the sacrificing of Isaac is actually just a nightmare. Like it's not like there are some commentators think it's not even a real thing, Because if God only speaks to them in it, it's just basically like this like extended nightmare that that Abraham just has to live through, as horrible as that is. So we already kind of talked about why it's problematic to talk about God speaking. Think about, now I want you to kind of think of, like, transfer this to, like, 2026. There are also, like, reasons that the Torah alludes to that are also very applicable today about why talking about what it means to say that God spoke to someone is so problematic. What is...
There's so much noise. There's everywhere there's noise. So, and you're distracted and you've got, your devices, and talking, and here I have this all the time. I call people and they put the TV on and turn it off. So it's like there's always noise. And you've got your own thoughts going on. So how do you know when it's God?
Yeah, so there's a lot of noise and there's a lot of information out there. There's very little reason to suggest that the things that end up making their way to us through all of that noise are like the best things or the most factual things or the kindest things. If anything, it seems like it's all the opposite stuff. So like that's also a problem about God speaking, because it can feel like a big void. Like, David, I saw your hand, and then Adam.
Someone came up to you on the street and said, well, I just spoke to God and he has a message for you. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, to this day, there are people who will tell you that God spoke to me and said X. Usually in the modern day, when they say that, most people dismiss them, but they make a reasonable point of saying, like, well, didn't people say it was weird when Abraham said that God spoke to him? Like, why is it so weird for me to say? Why is it so weird for me to say? Weird for me to say that. But it is something that, when you do it, most definitely, when you say that to someone, they are, they're most of the time they're not going to react to it in a very positive, enthusiastic way. Like, tell me more, please, Adam.
We all talk to God, but when God talks back to us, then we should probably see him.
Right.
But why is the first part totally normal and appropriate, and the second part is, bordering on psychosis? But I probably not, but somewhere in in Judges or the Apocrypha, is there a point where it's supposed to be said, we're done, no more prophets? Like, because they stopped writing books. Most of us haven't heard from God directly. Like,
so I want to define a few terms there, just because for those who are not familiar. So Adam is asking if any of the books in the Hebrew Bible or sort of Jewish books from that time period after the Torah make reference to there being a point where God stops talking to people. And there's no like exact point where that happens. Certainly Joshua, Samuel, King David, all those people, there are references to them being spoken to, and almost all the prophets, basically. It's interesting that in the Christian Bible, the last book is a prophet whose name is Malachi, who sometimes is translated as Malachi. And the reason that that's the last book in the Christian Bible is because it's the last reference to people being spoken to by God, so that you can transition to the Christian Bible, where God is
it's a Hebrew book, but
more, yeah, exactly. But in the way we have it organized, there isn't really a point where it stops. But you are correct that as you get further into it, God definitely talks less. Now, why that is, is an interesting question that I could give you several very thick 500-page books to read if you'd like. But Ezra will read them. Okay, great. Thank you. Much appreciated. But it is a challenge. I mean, because also on top of all of these things, one of the things the Bible will warn us a lot about later, when we get to the end of the Torah, is false prophets, which I think alludes a little bit to like what Susan's saying or what David said here, which is that like when there's no way to verify that someone is speaking, that God is speaking, and let's just say that for me, when I normally see someone who people are treating as if everything they say is almost like a divine being is saying it, that usually to me is a red flag, not like a sign that I should go like running towards that person. Usually when I see that referencing somebody, I want to run away as far as possible from them. And so, it's not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing. And I thought I would bring all of this up in terms both because it's Open Door Shabbat and also because of my pathway students. We have had our first class this week, which is that it is entirely possible, perhaps even normal and expected, that a lot of the God language that we use in the Torah is going to be very hard for people to sort of decide what they think it means. Like pinning it down to one right answer is kind of a fool's errand. So for people who have been looking at this their entire life, it can feel problematic. Like shouldn't I figure this out at some point? And I'm not. And if you're new to it, you might be saying to yourself, well, if I don't totally buy into it, especially because other religions are a little bit more vivid in their language about referring to about God speaking to them or another divine name, and it can make a person feel like I'm doing it wrong. Like at any point in their Jewish journey, to feel like if I don't totally have a thing I buy into, I must be doing it wrong. And what I love to show when you look at the different answers the rabbis give is that you can't possibly be doing it wrong, because I can give you every definition under the sun from people who have forgotten more about Judaism than I'll ever know as your rabbi, and they still do, and their answers all still leave us needing something that's missing. It's just not possible to give a complete explanation of it, and thus saying God spoke is probably just the best word we have to use. What else? Like what? Like we can only use the words that we have available to us. So speak is probably the best word we've got. It's imperfect, but it's like how democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others, right? Like, so many things I could say there. So many things I could say there right now. That's okay. That's okay. It's all right. I'm smiling because I actually think that maybe yesterday might be the first moment that the person in my house that we refer to as the Orange Man or Donald Duck, because we don't ever use that person's name in my house, that people may have finally joined those of us who have known for a while that this person is a racist, and we can just kind of call them that, and it saves a lot of time. That might be, I actually think that there's something accomplished in the world by being able to just say, like, let's just stop pretending and giving, So it's weird that I had to get to that point, but what can I say? It was cleansing for me to see that in the midst of not a great week. Sorry, but I digress. Thanks, Adam, for digressing me. But again, speaking is just the best form of the word, just the best word we can come up with, and that's okay. It's okay for things to be a little bit inadequate. Not everything needs to be bundled up nice and clearly. In fact, one of the things that we'll say in the prayer book over and over again is that I can't possibly say enough. There's just not enough. This is the best I've got. This is the best I've got. And, you know, how many of us at different points in time feel like our best effort is just not enough? You know, at a lot of things. I'm trying as hard as I possibly can, and it just is not enough. And so in some ways, I think that in some ways our tradition actually kind of models that in a different way of saying, like, when we say God speaks, we could spend hours upon hours trying to figure it out, and we still probably won't reach a satisfactory answer. But that might just have to be enough. We just have the best answer that we possibly can have. Otherwise, you're going to exhaust yourself from overthinking it all. Any final comments or questions or smart remarks? You have a smart remark?
Not a smart remark.
Okay, Blake, please.
What you say is like how do you know when enough is enough? Like, how do you know
Blake asked, how do you know when enough is enough? Well, you mean about anything, or about like the whole idea of figuring out what it means when he says God speaks, or both?
Yeah, figuring out what it is.
I think that, to me, I would say enough takes place when I feel like the best answer I've settled on is one that I can find consistently meaningful, I guess. Like, if the answer, like, if a person finds the explanation of that not meaningful, then I would say, yeah, we should try and find another one for you. Now, maybe, look, you might then ask, like, what if you keep searching and searching and searching and you don't find one that's meaningful? The beauty of having all the different answers is that that's very hard. It's very hard to reach that endpoint. It's kind of, I mean this lovingly, like in a weird way, like studying Jewish texts is like the world's greatest pyramid scheme. Because, you know, a pyramid scheme collapses when it stops getting new people to put money into the scheme. I don't want to describe, by the way, Judaism's not a scheme, I'm just saying. But the point is that we have chosen to find our meaning by adding more, by seeing as adding more and more into the conversation is always a good thing. And therefore it never collapses, because there's always something else that you can add, and you don't have to there. And where it's not like a pyramid scheme is that no one person gets all the benefit of that. No one person gets all the benefit of it, because you can just keep adding and adding different things. And there'll be, you know, there hasn't been any real interesting new ways, I would say, of describing what God is in the last several decades, but there will be at some point. Every century, there's a few ideas that kind of resonate more than others. But it's part of why I wanted to pick a little bit of a challenging thing for us to think about today. Because if we just kind of look at this as sort of just like a metaphor that we're not going to spend that much time on it, then it eventually also loses meaning. You got to really go into it to actually kind of find something that works for you and explore around there for a little while. Okay, it is 11:48. We're going to recite the Musaf Amidah and begin wrapping up our Shabbat morning together. Thank you, Adam. We're now in our blue books on page 155. 155. Yitgadal v'yikadash merabah b'yalma divarach yeruteh v'yamlech malchuteh b'chayechon v'yamechon v'chayedechol b'Yisrael b'galav yizman karim v'imru amen. Yehesh merabah v'vorach le'olam l'me'al ma'ya yiparach yiprah v'yishtabach yipar v'yitraram v'yitnaseh V'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shmena kudsha brichu le'la min kol birkata b'shirata Tushbekata v'nechamata, damiram b'yama b'imru, amen. We rise on page 156b for the Musaf Amidah together to the Kiddusha on page 157. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avoteinu Elohei Abraham Elohei Yitzchak v'Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachav Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim v'Konei Yaakov v'Zocher Asei Avot Umevin Goel Libnei B'neihem L'man Shmo B'Yahava Melech Ozer Pokeru Moshiach U'Magen Baruch atah Adonai Magen Avraham U'Foked Sarah Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai Mechayei Metim Atah Rab Lehoshia Mashiva Ruach U'Morid Hagashem Mechalkel Chaim Bechesed Mechayei Metim Berachamim Rabim Somech Noflim Berofech Olim Umatir Asurim Umekayem Emunato Lishenei Afar Michamocha Bal Gevurot Umido Melach Melech Meimit Umekayem Matzbiach Yeshua v'nemanat halachayot metim Baruch atah Adonai mechayei hametim. Page 157. Naritzicha v'nakdishcha kesod siach sarvei kodesh hamakdishim shimcha b'kodesh katuv yad nemiecha v'kara zeh el zeh v'amar kadosh 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 Adonai tzvaot Meloch haaretz kevodo malei olam mishartav sholim zelazeh ayem mikom kvodo lumatam baruch yomeru baruch kevodo Adonai mimikomo yifem berachamim v'yachonamam yachadim shemo erev l'ger b'chol yom tamid Hamayim bi'ava Shema Omrim Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Eloheinu Avinu Malkeinu Moshenu V'yashin Rachamav Sheni Le'nei Kol Chai Li'at Lachem L'Elohim Ani Adonai Elohechem U'v'divrei kodeshecha katuv Le'mor Yimloch Adonai Le'olam Alayek Sion L'dor vador Hallelujah, L'dorvadornaki godlecha, Ulnetzad ezakim b'risharcha nakdish, V'shivchacha Eloheinu mipinu le'em Moshe olam boed, Ki el melech gadol v'kadosh atah baruch atah Adonai ha'el hakadosh. We're going to take a few minutes for quiet prayer between pages 158 and 161. Please recite the Amidah in Hebrew or English, whatever language is most meaningful to you, and it's also a perfect chance for you to offer your own personal private prayers before God. We continue on page 181 with Kaddish Shalem. Yikadal v'yikadash shemei rabba b'yamani v'rachirute b'yamlich malchute b'chaychonu b'yamachonu b'chayidechol beit Yisrael b'agala b'zman kariv imru amen yehe shmei rabba mevarach le'alam yamei amaya yiparach Yiparach yishtabach yibaratram v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shmei kudsha brichu le'ila min kol birchata v'shirata Ushata v'necha matad amram b'yama v'imru amen tikabal slot kon avot kon l'kol Yisrael kodamon di b'shmaya v'imru amen yehi shalom rabba min shmaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen oseh shalom b'mromav hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. We continue on page 182 with Ein Keloheinu. Ein Keloheinu, Ein Kadonenu, Ein Kimalkeinu, Ein Kimoshienu, Mi Keloheinu, Mi Kadonenu, Mi Kimalkeinu, Mi Kimoshienu, Nodel Eloheinu, Nodel Adonenu, Nodel Malkeinu, Nodel Moshienu, Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adonenu, Baruch Malkeinu, Baruch Moshienu, Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonenu, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu Moshienu, Atahu Shehiktiru Avoteinu Lefanecha Ekitoret Hasamim Ein Keloheinu Ein Kadonenu Ein Kimalkeinu Ein Kimoshienu. We rise, page 183, for Aleinu quietly. Kakatu b'toratecha Adonai imloch le'olam bo'ed v'nemar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz Bayom hahu yeh Adonai echad Ushemo echad. You may be seated. Today is the 20th day of the month of Shvat. We observe the following yard sites here at ACI. Nathan L. Gunsberg, Joseph Hartman, Lena Bayless, Milton Paretsky, Nathan B. Cohen, Jacob Schawelson, Max Kemp, Gertrude Schoenfeld, Jan Oppeliner, Fanny Kuppersmith, Elsa Mayer, Betty Rothstein, Sarah Friedman, Amelia Eisenberg, Millie Miller, Bella Siegel, Isidore Sipes, Lieutenant Clyde Statz, May June Siegel, Abraham Bernstein, Emma Weiner, Edward Saunders, Anna H. Fox, Abraham C. Gottlieb, Dora Goldsmith, Leonard L. Bernstein, Dr. Alau A. Livingston, Moses M. Birnbaum, Isaiah Bronstein, Dora Rubenstein, Michael Freeman. Those who are mourning, those who are observing yard site, please rise for Kaddish Yatom, the mourner's Kaddish. Yit Gadal v'yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah v'yalman tivarach hirute v'yamlich malchute v'chayechon u'vyomechon u'chayedechol beit Yisrael ba'agala u'vizman kariv v'imru amen yehe shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam u'lamei almaya yiparach v'yishtabach v'yipa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei kudsha brichu La'ela min kol birkata v'shirata tushbekata v'nechamata damiram b'alma v'imru amen yehe shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen oseh shalom b'mromav hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. It is wonderful to spend the morning with all of you. If you're here for the first time, I hope you have felt welcome and had a good, warm experience. If this is your first time in a synagogue or you feel like there was a lot that you were lost, don't worry, don't give up. It takes a little bit of time. I'm just going to give you a few quick announcements about what's going on at the synagogue in general. First of all, next week, next Shabbat is what is known as the National Council of Jewish Women's Repro Shabbat, which is Shabbat in recognition of the importance of reproductive health in the United States. Monday night of this coming week, we are having a guest speaker, Professor Michal Rauscher of Rutgers University, who is going to be sharing research on Jews in the United States who have terminated a pregnancy and what a Jewish experience around abortion and abortion rights looks like. Michal is terrific. I don't believe there's any charge to attend, so you just go to the Friday flyer and register for the Zoom session. It'll be Monday at 8. We are currently starting our first Israel Book Club. Kiwi is not here today. We have not figured out the first date for the book club, but we picked the first book, which is a book called A Rich Brew by Shachar Pinsky. We're alternating between fiction and nonfiction. So this is a book about the surprising and central role that cafes played in modern Jewish culture. Additionally, Purim is coming up. March 1st is going to be our annual Purim Carnival Purim party. The Monday night is our Megillat Esther reading. I am looking for people who want to read Megillat Esther. If you've never read before, but you'd like to learn, I'm happy to teach you. Last year we had 4 new readers who had never read before. It's not as hard as it sounds. And then March the 13th, please keep your eye out for registration for Shabbat Across America, which is our big Friday night dinner here, catered almost always from Ben's Deli. And I hope that you'll join us for that. We're going to conclude with the singing of Adon Olam, page 187. Following that, we'll do Kiddush and Hamotzi, and we have a little bit of Nash in the auxiliary room, what's also sometimes called the Ladies Guild room here. That's the historic name of it. As I mentioned earlier, if anyone here, especially for those in my class, want to come up and actually see the inside of the Torah, I've kept the Torah out so that you can see it before I put it away. And with that, we're on page 187. Thanks for coming up, Ezra. Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yitzir Nivra Li'et Nasa B'chepso Kol Azai Melech Shemo Nikra Azai Melech Shemo Nikra V'yacharei Kichlot HaKol Levado Yimloch Nara V'hu Haya V'hu hoveh, v'hu yiyeh, v'tifara, v'hu yiyeh, v'tifara, v'hu echad, v'yein sheni lehab, shilo lehachbira, v'li reshit, v'li tachlit, v'lo ha'oz, v'ha'misra, v'lo ha'oz, v'ha'misra, v'hu eli, v'chai go'ali, v'tzur chevli, v'yetzara, v'hu nisi, umanos li, menat kosi, v'yom ekra, menat kosi, v'yom ekra, be'ado, afkid ruchi, v'yetishan, v'ayira, v'imeruchi, geviati, Adonai li v'lo ira, Adonai li v'lo ira. Page 315, please rise. V'shamru v'nei Yisrael Shabbat l'sod Shabbat Dordam Brit Olam. Beini u'vein b'nei Yisrael ki le'olam ki sheshim yom asad anay shmei b'yad ha'aretz u'yom ha'shlish Shabbat v'yinafash. Zachor yom ha'Shabbat l'kodesho. Sheshet yamim tava v'sita kol malachtecha. V'yom ha'shlish Shabbat l'nai Elohecha lo taseh kol malacha ta nimka v'itecha. Abdecha v'amatcha v'amtecha v'rkashi v'sharecha Yishayim Masadonai Reshamayim Yad Aretz Adayam Bekol Asher Bam Bainach B'Yom HaShvi Al Kain Beirachana Yom HaShrab Bayikat Sheu Sabri Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam B'rei Pri Agafen Potech Yadechem Azvil L'Kol Chai Ratzon Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Hamotzi Lechem Min Haaretz. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Put the light on.